In Elizabethan times, poverty was a significant and growing problem that was exacerbated by various social, economic, and religious factors. One of the key reasons for the increasing levels of poverty was the religious changes that took place during the Reformation. The dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII in the 1530s meant that a crucial source of charity and support for the poor was lost. The monasteries had been centres of poor relief, providing food, shelter, and care for those in need. With their closure, this support system disappeared, leaving many of the poor without the assistance they had previously relied on. The situation was further worsened by rapid population growth, which put additional pressure on resources and led to rising prices. During the 16th century, the population of England increased significantly, which resulted in greater demand for food and goods. However, the supply of these necessities did not keep pace with demand, causing prices to soar. This period of inflation, known as the price revolution, made it increasingly difficult for many people, especially those on fixed incomes or with little to no land, to afford basic necessities. As the cost of living rose, more people found themselves slipping into poverty. At the same time, developments in agriculture also contributed to rising unemployment and poverty. The introduction of new farming techniques, such as enclosure, transformed the agricultural landscape. Enclosure involved the consolidation of small, scattered plots of land into larger, more efficient farms. While this increased agricultural productivity, it also displaced many rural workers who had previously depended on common land for grazing their animals or supplementing their income through small-scale farming. These changes left many labourers without work or a means to support themselves, forcing them to move to towns and cities in search of employment. Unfortunately, urban areas were often unable to absorb these new arrivals, leading to overcrowding, increased competition for jobs, and further poverty. Poverty became particularly severe in the 1590s, a decade marked by a series of poor harvests, economic downturns, and outbreaks of plague. The combination of these factors created widespread hardship, and the number of people living in poverty grew substantially. The government, recognizing the gravity of the situation, began to take a more active role in addressing the issue of poverty. This period saw the development of the Elizabethan Poor Laws, which aimed to provide a more organized and systematic approach to poor relief. During this time, society held the belief that the poor could be divided into three distinct categories: the helpless poor, the deserving poor, and the undeserving poor. The helpless poor were those who were unable to work due to age, illness, or disability, such as the elderly, the sick, and orphans. These individuals were considered worthy of assistance because their poverty was seen as beyond their control. The deserving poor were those who were willing and able to work but could not find employment due to economic circumstances. They were seen as deserving of help because they were not at fault for their poverty and were eager to work if given the opportunity. Finally, the undeserving poor were those who were perceived as able to work but unwilling to do so. This group included vagrants, beggars, and those who were seen as choosing a life of idleness or crime. The undeserving poor were often viewed with suspicion and contempt, and their poverty was considered a result of moral failings. The Elizabethan Poor Laws reflected these distinctions in their provisions for poor relief. The laws established a system in which local parishes were responsible for providing aid to the helpless and deserving poor. This assistance could take various forms, such as food, clothing, shelter, or small sums of money to help them survive. The Poor Laws also mandated the establishment of workhouses, where the deserving poor could be given work in exchange for support. These workhouses were intended to provide employment and a means of subsistence for those who were willing to work but unable to find employment elsewhere. In contrast, the undeserving poor were treated harshly under the Poor Laws. Vagrancy and begging were criminalized, and those caught begging or wandering without means of support could be subjected to severe punishments, including whipping, imprisonment, or even transportation. The aim was to deter idleness and encourage the undeserving poor to seek legitimate work or rely on family support rather than become a burden on society. Overall, the Elizabethan approach to poverty was shaped by a mix of compassion for the genuinely needy and a desire to maintain social order by discouraging what was seen as moral failing. The Poor Laws laid the groundwork for the development of the welfare system in England, establishing the principle that the state had a responsibility to care for those who could not care for themselves, while also upholding the idea that able-bodied individuals should contribute to society through work.